Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate to you everything you'll need to know for Jewelry 1. This is the assignment sheet you are working on. And yes, we're going to be using all of this, but I will go through each and everything, tell you what it's for, and it's actually all fairly simple. So first thing, you will need an alcohol lamp and you light it. Now remember, never walk around with these lit, okay? So you just light it while it's here at the table and then you can go put the lighter back in the store. Also, keep it arm's distance away so you're not leaning over it and burning your hair. Don't pass papers over it to other people like I just did, because then you can burn yourself or get it caught on fire. Okay, so in Jewelry 1, it has you make 3 rings, a plain ring, a relief design, and an inlay. I'm going to show you all 3 of those. Okay, so you will get a bigger piece of wax than this. I'm just using this one for demonstration. Okay, and it's gotten kind of gross, so there's all this stuff sticking to it. So I'm going to scrape it off and make it nice and clean. Then I'm going to use a ruler here, and I'm going to make a very thin ring. And I'm going to cut a strip of wax that is even all the way around. So you don't automatically just try and press as hard as you can. I'm really not pressing very hard with this razor blade. I'm pressing very lightly. And I'm just working my way through the wax until I've cut all the way through the table. Okay, and now I have a little strip of wax. So again, you want to scrape it because what will happen is you'll create a little ridge that you want to get rid of. So I'm going to scrape this. The nicer your wax is at this stage, the nicer your ring is going to be and the less work you'll have to do. All right, then we're going to wrap it around the mandrel. Now, if you want to size your ring, all you have to do is use the ring sizers and decide what size you want. So I'm going to put that on there and mark it with a pencil. And then that'll tell me that's where I'm going to make my ring, so it'll fit my finger. All right, now I'm going to wrap the wax around and push up. So I'm going to fold the extra wax up like that. So I'm going to look really close to you. Oh, you want them stuck together a little bit. Okay, I'm here after school. They're coming in with the garbages, so it might be a little loud for a second. We'll just do the best we can. Okay, we've got it like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting off the extra wax here, and I want to cut it off right at the point that they'll just join together like this. I don't want any overlapping of my wax. Okay, so I'm just going to heat up my tool. You don't have to heat it up too long. And I'm just going to look at it from this angle and I'm just going to cut right there. Remove the extra wax and push it together like that. So that's close. You can see where I joined it. Okay, so I tried not to leave any gaps. I tried not to overlap it. Just tried to join it right there. All right, now, because I did a nice clean joint, I can sand it. So, as I talked about before, grit. You're gonna get 2 kinds of sandpaper. This is 220, this is 120. It says on the back there. 120 is the heavier grit, the coarse, it's coarser. And then 220 is the finer grit. You can feel it. So, I'm gonna start with the heavier grit, the 120. And I'm gonna fold it into a little teardrop shape like this. Fold it, but don't crease it. You want it nice and wingy like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to sand over that seam that I created. Okay, and when I have it all smooth, then I can move to my finer grit sandpaper and I'll do the same thing. Sorry, that was kind of loud, but I didn't want to start over filming. All right, now we can move to the back side. So what has happened is I've smoothed everything out. You can't really tell there's a seam anymore, but it has little scratches in it. So I'm going to use the back side of the sandpaper. Either one, it doesn't matter. And this is gonna buff out those scratches and shine up your ring. Okay. Then I'm gonna use the curved end of my jewelry tool and any little chunkies on the side there, I'm gonna clean that up. Now I didn't have to sand the rest of my wax because I kept my wax nice and clean all the way up until this point. The only thing you should have to sand is the little part that you joined, okay? If you end up sanding your entire ring, you can over sand it, and what it does is it heats up the wax and it kind of melts it, and it melts it onto the mandrel, and then people try and take it off the mandrel and they're like, and they ruin their ring trying to take it off. So you shouldn't have to be sanding it forever. It's just a little bit of sanding, and there is your plain ring. All right, that is number one. When you get that finished to a point that you think will be good, you must get a grade written right here. That is your responsibility, that the teacher writes a score here, okay? I'm not sure who your teacher will be yet, but it's your responsibility that you specifically say, can I get a grade on this ring, and make sure the teacher writes a score there, okay? You can't just tell people, show people your ring, because when I'm in that situation, I see hundreds of rings a day. People show me their rings all the time, and I don't know if they want me to grade them or just give them feedback or just say, oh, that's looking great, okay? So it's your responsibility to be like, I need a grade, write it here, done. All right. Ring number 2 is going to be the exact same thing, but you do have to start over. I'm not going to start over because I'm doing a demonstration, but you do have to make ring number 1 and then do all of that over again for ring number 2 and then create a relief design. A relief design is just something you carve into the surface. So it can be a design or it can be a name or letters. I'm going to do little swirls, and you just do this with the pointy end of your jewelry tool. And it's very much like clay, where you carve in and then it leaves these little like chunks off to the side because you've pushed the extra wax or the extra clay off to the side in carving your design. So we don't want any of those little chunks on there. I honestly don't know, here, if I show you on the camera, if it's gonna be blurry. Let me see about this. It should autofocus. Maybe it's not focusing. Focus. Okay. I don't know how to make it focus on it. Okay, sorry. Well, anyway, you're gonna carve your design in, but it's going to leave these little chunks off to the side. So you gotta scrape those off or sand them off, but sometimes you end up closing up your design again after you scrape those off, so then you have to go back and re-carve it out. So it's kind of a process. You carve out your design, then you scrape it or sand the chunks off, and then you have to re-carve it out and then scrape and sand. So it should take a couple of times to get it to look good, okay? All right, so that's your relief design. All right, that would be ring number 2. All right, ring number 3 is an inlay. It's kind of like a double layered ring. So I'm gonna cut a strip of wax. And I'm going to cut another one that's exactly the same width. So I'm gonna use this one as a guide for cutting out this one. Okay, so you should have 2 strips of wax that are the same width. And again, you want to scrape those off, make them nice and clean. Scrape, scrape, scrape. All right, so, and then you're gonna wrap the first one, just like we did the first time, and join it, just like you did before. Heat this up. Boom. I did not heat up my tool very much at all, but that still worked. Okay. If you did a pretty clean joint, it's not all chunky, you don't even have to sand it because this is just the first layer. Okay, so we're gonna set that aside. In this second layer, you're going to carve a design in it, but you're gonna carve it all the way through. So the easiest thing, I mean, this is a pretty tricky ring. The easiest thing is just to do circles. So I just heat up my tool, cut a little circle in here, scrape it. And then I'll do another one. And you can decide, some people like it when their tool's nice and hot. Some people feel like they lose control because lots of times you can over melt your wax and then you're like, whoa, that like melted way more than I wanted to. So I think a good in between. You don't need it too hot, but a little heat is good. Okay, so I'm almost there. I'm gonna cut out 3 holes. Scrape all the wax away, and I've really kind of messed up the surface of my wax here, so I'm going to sand it. Start with the heavy grit, 120, then I'll move to 220, and then I'll use the back of the sandpaper. I find it's easier to do all this right now when the wax is flat. Before you attach it to your ring. Some people do it after they've attached it. I just think if you mess up at this point, it's easier just to get a new strip of wax and start fresh. Okay, so you can see there's like holes through my wax. Now I'm going to put that on top of my wax ring that I already made. That's like 2 layers. And then I'm gonna cut my wax off. Join them together. Okay, and I'm going to need to sand that joint because that's the one we actually see, so you're gonna wanna make that one nice. Oh, I did it wrong order, that's okay. And then the back of the sandpaper. And I'm going to do the back of the sandpaper over the whole thing, get it nice and shiny and smooth. And there's still some kind of chunks in my design, so I'm going to scoop that out. All right, so what you have is like a thicker ring, and it has this inlay design. That's what an inlay is called. But you also have kind of a crack between the 2 layers. So you have to melt the 2 layers together. So I'm going to heat up my jewelry tool just very gently. You don't want it too hot. And you bring this along the edge of the ring, sorry. And you're just melting the 2 layers together. So the 2 rings become one. You never wanted them to see, I mean, you never want it to show that it was ever 2 rings. You just want it to be one solid ring. Okay, and then if you mess it up too much, if you melt it up too much, then you need to sand it. But if you do a really careful job, you may not have to do any sanding. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, say I finished that. If you do want to sand, you can just put it right on here. Gotta be careful not to ruin your ring. Just sanding. Oh yeah, that looks nice. And then I'm gonna go to the finer grit. Okay, and then the back of the sandpaper. Okay, and then any extra wax you can just kind of scrape out with your curved end of your jewelry tool. And then you have an inlay ring. Okay. All right, so that is your 3 rings. So the plain one, the second one with the relief design, and then the third one is your inlay. Again, you will need a grade on each and every one of these, and it is your responsibility to make sure that you get the grade written down there, okay? All right, Then you'll have to invest one of them. You get to choose whichever one you like the most and you want to invest. I would suggest that you invest one. You don't wait till all 3 of them are done, because then once you invest, there's going to be a little bit of a waiting time. You're going to have to wait to get your projects back. So you want to be able to have another ring to work on while you're waiting for that to be invested. Okay, when you're ready to get something invested, do I not have a sprue now? I swear I got a sprue. I need to grab a sprue real fast. All right, this is a sprue. Okay, when you're ready to invest, always, always, always make sure you have a grade first. Then the project you're going to invest, you put it on the mandrel, and you decide where the worst spot of your ring is, because that's where you're going to put your sprue. I'm the teacher, so there isn't a worst spot on my ring. Just kidding. I'm just going to put it on the back. And you hold the sticky wax over the flame. Sorry, this is sticky wax. And you do it till it drops, and you put 1 drop on your ring, and then you stick the sprue on. And you just wait for it to cool off. You'll be able to tell it's cool because it'll turn this color again. It'll turn kind of like a whitish color. And then you can scrape the extra sticky wax off. You do not want a big glob down here. Okay, got the extra sticky wax off. Alrighty, now you need a flask and a button. This is the button, this is the flask, and you want to make sure that they fit each other. And your sprue is going to stick in the button, but this sprue is very, very long. It needs to be very deep down into the flask. So when you can cut the sprue, that sprue you get, you could use it 4 times. Your sprue does not need to be very long at all. It can be that short, okay? So save that, save your sticky wax, because you can use those so many times over. So many students just lose them, and it's money that they didn't have to spend. All right, now we're ready to weigh it. So we're gonna put it on the scale here. And this little piece of paper you need to fill out. You will find them in the investment area. There's a little cardboard box, and they're in there. All right. So what you're going to do is move this around until your lines match up. So, and all these little marks here represent decimal points. Okay, so that's about 1.3. Okay, so that's what you're going to write on the first line here, 1.3. And then it asks for 1.3 times 9. I did not bring a calculator with me. 3 times 9, 0.3 times. Okay. All right, so I've done this before in my head. I just can't remember right now on the spot. So we're going to pretend it weighs 1. That will make the math really easy. So, and it's really close. 1 gram times 9 is 9 grams. And then it's going to ask you to add 10, so that's 19. And then it's going to ask you to round to the nearest number that ends in 0 or 5. So 19 rounded up is 20. Okay, most of your beginning rings will probably come out to be 15 grams or 20 grams, all right? 25, maybe 30, but that's at the most. If you're getting some insane number like 60 grams, you're doing the math wrong, okay? So just compare to other people what they got, and it should be something similar, 20. Okay, then you need to write down somewhere on here the type of metal that you want. So say you want gold. So you just write gold down here. And make sure you write name. This is Larson, second period, and the date. The date is very important actually, because I've had to look at the date. Sometimes these papers get mixed up. These papers are actually very, very, very important. Your ring can't really be casted without one of these. And so sometimes if these get mixed up, I have to go through and see which ones are the newest. I can tell by the date. If you've casted several projects and you didn't write the date on any of them, these papers, if they get mixed up, that could be bad. So make sure to write the date. All right, so now we're ready to put it in the flask. This is your button. It's empty right here. It should have some beeswax in it, so you can get that from me in the store. It's just this like black wax. And you just warm it up with your hands and then put it in there. And then you drill a little hole with your jewelry tool. And then you stick your sprue in there. Careful not to knock your ring off your sprue. And then you can also just kind of push the wax down so it's holding your sprue. Ugh, I really needed more beeswax, but I'm not gonna get more. Okay, are you in there? All right, then we put our flask on. And this flask is plenty deep. My ring is clear down in there. That is very, very, very good. You wanna make sure that you can stick your finger in and you can touch the top of your ring and your whole first knuckle, see my first knuckle, goes into the flask, okay? If you make it too thin, you can have what's called a blowout. So here's your project, I'm casting it, I've melted all this metal, the centrifugal force is gonna push into the project. Well, if your project is clear up here near the top of the flask, there's not enough investment there to hold all the metal in. All the metal is just gonna bust out the back. And you have no project. Your project is gone forever, okay? So we don't want that to happen. Plus, it's a waste of my metal and it's a waste of my time. So, and it's a really dumb thing that you can easily prevent if you just make sure your project is far enough down in there. That's all you have to do. All right, and then you'll take this and you'll take this and you'll go over to the investing area, which I will show you on another demonstration on how to invest. But this process takes a long time. So if you need to invest because say it's Friday and we burn out on Friday and you want to get yours done on Friday, you need to have this part done on Thursday, okay? Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm gonna invest, and then they've gotta put the sprue on, and then they've gotta get it graded, and then they've gotta weigh it, and then they've gotta do this, and it just takes longer than you think. It really does. So make sure you plan ahead, and I would do this on the day before you want to invest, so it's all done, and then you can come into class the next day, and you're 100% ready to make the investment and pour it in. If you rush investing, you can mess up, and a lot of students mess up, and I prefer that you not mess up because it usually wastes supplies. So just make sure you're not rushing it. Do this the day before you want to invest. Don't think you can just hurry and invest because it takes a little bit longer than you think. All right, so what this worksheet entails are the 3 wax rings, and then one of them, those are each worth 100 points, and then one of them needs to be invested in metal. And then I will give you a demonstration on how to polish your metal project, and that'll be worth 200 points, and then you're done with your Jewelry 1 worksheet. All right, I think that's everything. Thanks.